Hi there. Thanks for joining. This is Zane Widener, Director of Technical Architecture here at RISC Networks, and I wanted to review one of our use cases today. Go through network segmentation, both macro and micro. So I got a little scenario here for us to walk through today so you can kind of get a sense for what we're doing. And so we have two organizations, the Yin and the Yang Corporation. I just decided to represent this in cats because, well, it's the internet, so I felt that was appropriate. And so these two corporations are separating. And so we have to figure out a couple things. Maybe we want to look at, okay, how are these two organizations communicating to one another? And what do those networks look like? How do I pull one out of the other? Maybe the Yang Corporation is interested in microsegmentation, SD-WAN, stuff like this. And so how do we get the relevant data we need to build those rules, do things like security groups, firewall rules, what have you, as we begin to make those changes to our environments. All right, so let's just jump in. And so first things first, I'm here in the platform. I think it's important to understand, I'm going to come over to our applications. And so if you're familiar with our platform, you understand the notion of what an application stack is. And so I've come into our application stacks and added a couple prefixes to the names of the groups to help me get it organized a little bit better. And so you'll see here I'll have a couple different ones. I'll have RSG groups or RISC service groups. So this is things like Active Directory, kind of common services that both corporations might use. I'll have Yang, right? Here we see our Yang accounting records app. But then I will also have Yin. And so these are the apps that belong to one corporation or the other. And so now here's where the fun starts. So we can come in at a high level and say, you know what, let's look at all of our applications. Look at the whole environment. And it's going to be kind of crazy, right? We might have a lot going on here. And so I've already come in and filtered some of this down. So let's bring it all in. And so this is what it looks like. And so because of those prefixes that we've added, we can start to narrow this down. Say I only want to look at traffic related to yin. Okay, well then let's come in here and we'll type in the word yang and select all those apps here. And now I'm going to pull them out of my visualization. Now I still see we have some of those RSG groups left in, so let's pull those out as well. And so now I am only looking at the yin environment. And so I can look at those apps, understand how they're communicating. Here's where I might want to look at micro-segmentation a little bit further, but I'll cover that in just a minute. Now, furthermore, what I've done is if I come over here, I've gone into assets. And so we can see in our asset list that the group name will come in. We'll see the stack name here. And so what I might want to do is filter this and say, okay, yin, give me every device that's in a yin group. And then I can select my table here, highlight, and do some grouping. And so what I've done is come in and I've said, okay, I want to copy these devices. So copy is important here. I'm not moving them. And I'm going to move them into the, let's see, yin, maybe it's the yang. I think I did the yang one earlier. Yang Corp. Yin and Yang Corp. And so I'm going to move these devices into a corporate. So if I'm trying to understand just broad course boundaries between an environment, I can come here and do that as well. And so that's part of the power. So if I wanted to come in and say, okay, well, let me find my corp groups here. So I'm coming into my app stacks. I'm going to filter by the word corp. So I have those two groups built out with the different sets of servers in them. And so maybe I want to understand, okay, on the whole, how is yin communicating with yang? And understand those really broad course boundaries, or rather, how is it communicating to the rest of the environment? And so what I'll want to do is come in here, click on View All Connections. And now I'm going to come into a connectivity table that's going to show me all the directionality of those connections. And so I have a lot in here, right? We'll have our locations. So we'll be able to see, okay, here's how YinCorp is talking to different remote locations in the environment. And so this is important to know that if we have access to the network layer, we will put devices into physical locations. So this helps me understand that broader WAN or LAN level connectivity. right? What's sort of outside of scope from a licensing point of view of the assessment? And I can come in here and drill down further to say, okay, if I needed to know how the Yin Corp server environment is talking to, say, the Asheville headquarters, well, I can just come in here and do that. And so this is part of the process, is looking at what these rules are. I like to sort them on a protocol view and review them and say, okay, is this valid traffic? Is this what should be happening today? And if it is, I'm just going to mark that and I'm going to pull these out. I might pull it down as a table and use that as kind of a working table with my different firewall rules as I establish them. And so that in a real quick nutshell is how we might do coarse boundaries of a network. Now, if we're at the point where, you know what, I would rather start to think about doing microsegmentation. Well, there's a couple different ways I can do this. Now I'm going to stay here within our AppStacks page just because it's a little bit easier for me. But I could also come up here and do it in the migration plans, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But now I'm going to come in and say, okay, let's find a good app here that'll work for me. Let's see. And so I'll have my app and go, okay, here's my, let's try this one, Yin Customer Portal Web. I got 2 servers in here. And so let's say one of these is my database server and the other one is my web server. And so what I'm going to want to do here is understand, okay, if I'm doing microsegmentation, well, how is the database layer talking to the web layer? And now I can look at this directly here and see, okay, what connections are happening and just view that directly through the visualization and pull this out and say, okay, here you go. Here's how they're communicating. What I may also want to do is come into this app and I'm going to build 2 sub apps from it. So I'm going to break this thing apart. And I'm going to say, okay, let's just kind of pretend here that this one is my database layer. And so I'm going to right click and I'm going to say edit stack membership. And I want you to move that device. I'm going to create a new group and I'm going to call that Yin Customer Portal Web. And then we'll call that DB. Just put some stuff in there, move that device. And then I'm going to rename this layer Web. Save that. And so now when I come into the connectivity tables, I will be able to see, let me refresh my screen here just so it loads those changes I made. And be able to see here is how my web layer talks to my database layer. And I can see the number of connections. I can look at the world from the perspective of web to see, okay, how is it communicating out to my Austin sales office is talking into it. Right? I can also see we're talking out to, well, really only the application environment. So that's good. And so this is where I would come to start to drive down to those rules, understand how is that particular piece of my app communicating, how are the different layers communicating, so I can port those over. Now, I also have the ability to do that within this migration plans feature. And so to the extent that you don't want to break apart your app stacks in the way I was mentioning, because that'll affect other reporting throughout the platform, well, let me isolate it. And so I can come in here and create a plan and call this plan, I want to base it off of my application stacks and I want to call it network segmentation project. And so I can create that plan here. And so that's going to bring in those groupings. And so essentially, this will be a self-contained grouping entity. And so I can add different waves here. I can break apart these groups and create them in totally different ways that will not affect the application stacks. And so that's another way to do it. So I've seen people come in here and say, okay, I'm going to add another wave. And this wave will be things I'm looking to do something on July 1, for instance, right? And so I'm going to add that as a wave here. And so maybe at a control group level, if you have Scrum teams and things like that, they may be saying, let's look at the application portfolio. Right, so I want to look at everything that's out there. And then as a control board, we will assign things into different buckets. So we're going to say, hey, customer, customer portal web, that's going to go into, let this load here. That's going to go into that July 1st wave. And so I can come in here and say, okay, I'm going to move it down to that wave, save that group. And so as a control group, you could come in here, assign that out, and then have teams come in and then further subsegment those servers. Now, in this case, it's already been done, but I could further subsegment those servers into different stacks as I would within the app stacks, but I'm not affecting the broader platform. And so this is just another way, a more tactical way to approach it. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to go through network segmentation with me today. I hope it was beneficial for you. And if you have any questions, please just reach out to your account manager and take care.